I so wanted to make this sleeveless turtleneck sewing pattern because first of all, it is such a timeless garment, and secondly, it is springtime, which means that weather is constantly changing, and this is such a great piece for layering. This is a beginner-friendly sewing project that you can easily make in 3 hours. This turtleneck pattern comes in 2 lengths, as a midi dress or as a top. I made quite a few samples before to make sure that the armholes aren't too tight to avoid that scratchy feeling in armpits, but at the same time they are high enough to cover a bra properly. As an idea, besides the regular single jersey, I made this dress from a transparent lycra fabric and I wore our knitted dress under it to keep everything appropriate. I am going to use the Margot pattern, which you can find in our Etsy or online store. The links are down in the description. It comes in A0 format, which you can print at a copy shop, or US letter A4 format that you can print with the regular printer. There are only 4 pattern pieces. This line indicates the recommended top option and the thickest line is the pattern with hem allowance. But of course you can pick the length that you want, maybe even as a crop top. Simply redraw the hemline at the height you prefer. You will need a fabric that has at least 30% of elasticity, for example single jerseys or rib knits. Or as a crazy idea, I also use this pleated lycra, which isn't exactly a jersey material but it is stretchy enough. You will also need matching threads and I highly recommend to use a jersey stretch sewing machine's needle. And for the hem I will use twin needle. But if you don't have it, I have linked a video in the description what hemming method you can use instead. I will mostly use a serger, but you can also use a sewing machine stitch that has more stretch than the regular straight stitch. Let's start by cutting out all the pattern details. Notice that I am not folding the fabric on half, but instead I fold the edges. The fold width is the same as the front or back panels at the widest part. This way we can save a lot of fabric, and actually I think that I will have enough fabric left to make also leggings from this fabric. Take the neck panel and fold it on half. Stitch the side seam. To be frank, I try to avoid pinning when I am using a serger because it is a risk to forget to take out the pins and it can ruin the serger's knife. And it's a huge safety risk if the pins start to break and fly. Press the seam towards one side. Then fold the turtleneck panel and press the folded edge. Make sure that the side seam is matching and also the raw edges are exactly at the same place. Lay front and back panels with the right sides facing. Stitch both shoulder seams. Press both shoulder seams towards the back panel. Take the turtleneck panel's raw edges and place it along the dress or top's neckline. The turtleneck's right side has to match with the dress right side. You can match the turtleneck seam with the shoulder seam, or you can place the seam on the back panel's middle point. Okay, this time I am pinning around, and when you have pinned around, then stitch around. Make sure that all 3 layers get stitched together. If you are also using a serger, I highly recommend to leave a longer tail of threads and then use a needle with a big eye and hide these threads inside the serger stitch. This will ensure that the stitch will stay in place even after washing in a washing machine. Lay the front and back panels with the right sides facing each other. Pin the side seams. My suggestion is to always start pinning starting from the armholes because there might be a bit of difference in the length and it's always easier to even out the hemline rather than the armholes. Press the side seams towards the back panel. I find it more convenient to press only one layer, but my ironing board is too wide to put my dress on it that way, so I am using my small sleeve ironing board. Take the armhole binding tapes and fold them on half. Stitch the shortest side seam. To save some thread, you can stitch one right after another, plus it saves a bit of time as well. Press the seam towards one side. Lay this binding tape on the dress with the right sides facing each other. Match the binding tape seam with the dress side seam. Pin around and stitch. If you are using a sewing machine, then stitch 7 mm apart from the edge. The next step is optional, but I feel it helps a lot to nicely press the binding. Understitch the binding tape. Make a stitch with the sewing machine 1 mm apart from the previously made seam. This stitch has to go through the binding tape and the seam allowance. You can use the regular straight stitch because the armholes will not get that much of pressure when you will be wearing the dress, so no worries about popping stitches. I prefer to work from the fabric's right side because then it is easier to control the distance from the previously made seam. However, at the beginning of my sewing journey, I prefer to work from the wrong side because then I felt more confident that I will not miss stitching through the seam allowance. So feel free to experiment to find what makes you more comfortable. Press the binding towards inside in a way that you can see a small bit of the dress panels. This way we'll be sure that the binding is not visible from the outside. Fold the binding's raw edge around the seam allowance and press. If you are more experienced, you probably can skip this pressing part, but I don't know. Pressing now is a bit of extra work, but I feel it makes the next step so much easier. If it helps you, you can also pin down the binding tape. When you have pressed around, then make a stitch around 7 mm apart from the edge. You can pick a slightly different amount. The main thing is that you keep an even distance from the edge because the stitch will be visible on the dress's right side and you don't want the stitch to be jumping around. Press the armholes flat. Let's do a quick try-on to make sure we like the length. Remember that there is 2.5 cm of hem allowance, so you can pin it to see how the end length will look like. This is a good moment to make this dress shorter if you want to. Also, you can check how it fits at the waist and hips, and it's still possible to make it tighter. We are so close to the finish line. So I'm going to use the hemming method with a twin needle, and for that I will start by neatening the hemline. If you don't have the twin needle, you can also fold the hem and stitch it with the sewing machine's 3-step straight stitch. If you don't have it, then please check the description. I have added a short video how you can make a fake cover stitch hem. Mark 2.5 cm from the edge on the fabric's right side. Fold the hem allowance towards inside and pin around. Take the regular needle with the thread in a different color. Hand stitch right in the middle of the neatening stitch. This hand stitch has two functions. It holds the hem allowance and it will work as a guideline for the twin needle. Hand stitch around the whole hem. Change the sewing machine's needle to the twin needle. You will need 2 spools of threads at the top of sewing machine. Thread them both as you would if you had a single thread. But at the end, before the needle, there should be one hook on the left side and one on the right side. If you don't have the hook on the right side, then use the left hook for both threads and then put them through separate needles. Use a fabric scrap to test the stitch before, and if the stitch looks like a big bump, then you might want to decrease the thread tension. However, if you lower the tension too much, then the stitches themselves will look bumpy, so you have to look for some middle ground. Also remember that if the hem is slightly uneven, then it might be fixed with some good pressing. I will use the normal stitch length, but I will not backstitch. Instead, I will make a few stitches on top of the previously made ones. Make a stitch in a way that the hand stitch stays exactly in the middle of the needles. Take out the threads from the hand stitch, properly press the hem, and you have finished! If you enjoyed this tutorial, please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel for more sewing and knitting tutorials. Bye!